Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing coverage of Diablo IV. We've done episodes for every single act of the campaign. We've done episodes for every single season over the last year and a half. And now we have the first big expansion, Vessel of Hatred. We've got a really structured way to talk about this. We're going to do some big comparisons with the big Diablo III expansion. We're going to talk about some technical bugs, some state of the game, some fun factor, and then a big old meatball of a closing question. But before we get to that, Maggie, do you have any top-of-the-line thoughts on this expansion?
Sure. So I was actually listening back to our most recent episode that we did on the season of the Infernal Hordes, the most recent season of the game. And we spent about the last 10 minutes of the episode kind of just projecting our thoughts about the coming expansion and how excited we were, and we were feeling pretty optimistic. And it was a little frustrating to listen to that back because we were so optimistic. And this season wasn't... God, this expansion, I keep doing that. This expansion wasn't bad. It just, there were things that were frustrating, and I'm disappointed that it didn't live up to our expectations. But it's complicated, so I'm excited.
Yes, exactly. It's complicated. I think I have a lot of kind of scattered thoughts about it, and I'm excited to beat those into an interesting, a shape of something comprehensible during this episode. So
fantastic.
When I was doing the notes, I think the big anchor for this discussion, the only thing that makes sense for me, is to talk about Vessel of Hatred in the context of the singular big expansion for Diablo III, which is Reaper of Souls. Mm-hmm. I remember when that came out.
I do too.
And the comparison is apt because these are both the first big expansions for a Diablo game, and they give you a similar amount of content. They give you a new class, and they give you a whole new act for the campaign. And Reaper of Souls took a while to complete. I mean, Act 5, I remember being fairly beefy. It really did feel like a finale. Obviously, Vessel of Hatred is not going to be the only expansion here, but it is a similarly beefy endeavor.
Sure,
it took us,
yeah.
We wanted to get this episode up as soon as possible after the expansion came out on the 8th, but obviously it's been a few weeks.
It actually took quite a while to get through it, which that was one nice thing. It wasn't just like, oh, this took me 2 hours, because that's always disappointing, is when you get this big expansion and it's like you get through it really quick and it feels like, oh, that was it. So I liked how robust it was.
Yes,
that was nice.
Yes, I agree. And that is important. These are games we replay. These are games we play together. I want a journey.
Yeah, you also want to feel like you're getting, bang for your buck. It's not free like the seasons. You have to pay for the expansion. It was what, $40?
Oh, yeah.
So, that's significant in gaming. So, yeah.
So let's start, before we get to the class, it's going to be fun to talk about Spiritborn, but before we get there, let's talk about the campaign in two very specific ways.
Okay.
Because I think there are two buckets we can break our thoughts down into here. It's the aesthetic of now you have me doing
Sorry,
it.
the expansion. Expansion.
Aesthetic of the expansion, and it's the plot of the expansion.
Okay,
so let's start with aesthetic. And again, foregrounding the comparison to Reaper of Souls, I went back through some screenshots and some descriptions of what was Act 5 of Diablo III, the Reaper of Souls expansion. And it's so pretty. So it's
it really is.
Haunted towns and resurrections. Remember all that like light teal foggy stuff reanimating the skeletons and corpses in that cool city with the winding cobblestones, and it was beautiful.
It was great.
It was a great cherry on top of the Diablo 3 campaign, which already had so many just peak Diablo locations and scenery and aesthetics. It was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And for me, it is that high fantasy medieval Europe. That's what I want from Diablo.
That's what Diablo is and has been for a long time. Yeah.
Right. So here's where we have a bit of an identity crisis, growing pains, whatever euphemistic thing you want to call it, because Vessel of Hatred, it's kind of punching your way through the jungle and desert for 6 hours.
Sure, yeah. And what's interesting is that we knew this was coming. This was what had been advertised, especially because the Spiritborn class is very influenced by these more like, this kind of jungle-y thing that you're talking about. And they've said it's not based on a specific like culture or, people, but it's like vaguely Aztec and vaguely something else.
There are ziggurats and things.
Sure. And I really liked it. I thought it was really cool. But it didn't feel like Diablo. I feel like I was playing a different game. Yeah. And it was like, I would buy this game. I like this game. It's interesting. I like this setting. I like this feeling. But it didn't make sense as being Diablo for me. That's, I think, what really got me.
Yes. If this had been a spin-off game or a new IP with similar systems for Diablo, I think that would have worked. But, we're kind of jumping the gun here. But I think the thing that was sort of galling for both of us, even though I enjoyed the experience of moving through this act of the campaign, it never, ever for me, felt like it was the next chapter of the story we'd played up until this point.
No, definitely not, because you know what it is? The whole time you're just looking for Narelle.
Well, we'll get there. I don't want to... Yeah,
sure, yeah. But like,
was...
sorry, more about the aesthetic. Like, it was reminding me of like a game like Assassin's Creed is able to, from game to game, jump to different cultures and aesthetics and styles, because that's kind of the point, is that you go to these different time periods and cultures and mythologies and stuff, and that, so the game is very dynamic in that way. So what is core to that game's identity is like the play style and the skill tree thing and the assassination stuff. Like, that all makes sense. That's not the kind of game Diablo is. Diablo is very cemented in a specific aesthetic and style and sort of like cultural touch point, and moving into this different thing didn't make a lot of sense for me. Again, it was really cool and I liked it, but it didn't feel like Diablo. No. And like, I really liked being inside the temples, like as your dungeons. That was really, really cool. Like all the different, like, felt like very maze-like, and that was exciting. And the jungle stuff was cool. And obviously the Spiritborn class worked really well with this new, geographical, cultural setting, but it didn't feel like Diablo.
It was consistent, but it was not. It was consistent within itself on its own terms.
It had great vision,
but not within the larger story of what it feels like Diablo IV has been doing for the last year and a half.
Yes, right.
It felt like it kept asking this question of, what is Diablo to you?
Yeah.
And my answer is just not this. Like, this was fine. If you had... There was so little of the Diablo IV story in this. There was so little of consequence. There were so few returning characters that if you cut like 2 or 3 people, this could have just been a spin-off story in Nahantu.
Sure, yeah.
Dealing with the larger ramifications of the Burned Knights and sort of the aftermath of the main campaign. I would have been completely on board for that.
Okay.
But I got this like Drink More Ovaltine sense here, where it was like, I know there's a big thing on the horizon, but instead, in the moment where you need to get to that, we're going to tell this side story as a main story and just keep teasing you and not giving you anything. It reminded me, unfortunately, a lot of Destiny 2 Lightfall.
Oh, okay.
And that was the expansion that made me give up on Destiny 2.
Ooh.
So they were teasing this big finale, which turned out to be the final shape. That was their big last expansion that I still haven't played, even though I looked forward to it for 10 years. Lightfall, they kind of injected this extra expansion before that, and they delayed the final shape. And Lightfall was similarly in the aesthetic. It was all green. And it was in this weird 80s neon-y city.
Oh, okay.
And it was, I don't know, very short and disappointing, and a bunch of new characters I didn't care about. And then I finished it, and nothing had happened. Nothing had gone further. I didn't understand what was going on in the plot. No one did. There was this big mechanic called the Veil in the plot, and they never told you what the fuck the Veil was.
Oh, cool.
It was that. And I don't think Vessel of Hatred is nearly on that level.
No.
But the fact that it reminded me of that frequently enough was bad.
Yeah,
because
that's not good.
The jungle desert environment, it was weird, but there are always diversions in Diablo games. Even Diablo III moved through a bunch of different aesthetics: swampy stuff, desert stuff,
like Chaldeum and stuff.
The Khazra Den.
It's true.
There is variety here.
Yeah,
and I think there was some level of consistency with the overall series aesthetic. When you're inside these ziggurats, it looks like you're in a dungeon. That's fine.
Yeah.
That whole lakeside thing they did in the last hour or so of the campaign. Remember when all the water pulled back?
Oh, yes. You're going through like water portals and stuff. Yeah.
That was interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
And every time the story pulled us into the spirit realm, I think it reminded me a little bit of Reaper of Souls.
Yeah.
Where you have all those resurrections and the blue and the fog and the mist. There was some of that in the spirit realm, but I was just I constantly felt like I was grading against the aesthetic of this.
Yeah, and the Diablo 3 comparison is interesting because you're right. In that game, you do go outside of like the expected aesthetic and style and place. But the times that we're in kind of like the desert or like in Chaldeum and that kind of thing, that's around like, I don't know, Act 2 or 3. And in the game, it feels like a bit of a diversion. It feels like, okay, in the middle of our story, we're going to expand and go to this other place for a bit, but then we'll kind of come back to home base. And that's why like the, Act 5, which is the expansion, Reaper of Souls, you're back in that, familiar place that Diablo is you think is meant to be in. Here, instead, it was like we are truly expanding beyond our regular style and sense of place. And so then it just feels like we're just diverting out and out and out, and there's no home base to go back to. So I think the choice to do that here in the expansion rather than like in the middle of your campaign as like this is a diversion, but we'll come back.
Sure.
I think it's not a good choice.
Yeah, let's get into the plot stuff, because I feel we keep kind of nipping at the heels there.
Yeah.
I went back through, like I said, Reaper of Souls to try to refamiliarize myself with the plot of that one act of a game, 12 years ago. And it starts with the fall of that town or city or cobblestone place that I liked so much, which is called Westmarch.
That's right, yeah.
And there was all of this corruption. There was the guy with the hood and the big scythe, Malthael, who became the big villain. There was the Black Soul Stone, that whole, interesting plot point.
I remember that was cool.
And then you're thrown into this almost limbo-like area with all those weird, curvy, floating in blue nothing areas called Pandemonium that you're traversing for a while on your way to that final boss fight. So that was the general broad strokes plot of Reaper of Souls, the 5th act of Diablo III. By comparison to that, which builds to this kind of operatic finale, this is where the comparisons get tough for me, talking about Vessel of Hatred. Because so much of this campaign was fetch quests for characters in Nahantu that we didn't know.
Right.
And
had never met until now.
And every half hour they would sprinkle some breadcrumbs of, we're chasing Nerel.
Yep.
So it felt like for the first, genuinely 2/3 of the expansion.
Yeah, most of it.
It felt like, here's some busy work to do while we wait for the campaign to start.
Yes, that's what it felt like. And what's interesting is that I was thinking about the sort of the plot of the season campaigns, and those are obviously much smaller. But like those, this campaign felt like a season campaign in that it's like kind of related and matters a little bit, but not really. It's really just a vehicle for you to play more of the game and explore the new mechanics that the season has to offer. And that's what this felt like too. It didn't feel like it actually mattered for the central plot or your central characters who you've gotten to know for 5 acts. And it was so just kind of like, mess around for a little bit. You have to test out the new class. You have to test out, I don't even remember what sort of new things were added, like in terms of mechanics and gameplay. But it didn't feel like anything we were doing actually mattered, and that was really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it a step further. I think plenty of the seasons we've had so far have been more cohesive, focused, and to the point in their campaigns than this expansion was.
Sure.
I mean, Season 2, Season of Blood, which that's still
the best one.
The way that overhauled the Helltides and kept throwing you back in, or they weren't Helltides, they were those vampire versions of blood tides.
Yes.
Helltides. There was blood everywhere in that.
Blood, hell, tide, hatred. Yeah.
Season 4, Season of Loot Reborn. Even last season, I enjoyed the process of moving through that campaign with a couple new characters, some story that moved and resolved and didn't overly affect the main plot. That's how I would describe Vessel of Hatred, and I had a better time with those seasons.
Yes,
That's tough. Like, there were...
sorry, go ahead.
There were so many new people who came into the story and went and died and didn't move the needle.
Not at all.
While we were doing this, like, drink more Ovaltine thing, there's no Nerel. There's mention of Nerel, and eventually you get her in the last third of the story. But there's no Lorath.
Right. Yeah.
Our main character here,
it felt
pretty much.
like they didn't have a whole lot of story for like the actual characters we know and care about and for the actual story we've been following. And so they added in this other stuff to pad it out. So I think what you're saying about the seasonal campaigns feeling more to the point is because they didn't have to pad those out, because those can be much shorter and much simpler. And here it's like they wrote the same style of story, but they're like, it's got to be a little longer for this expansion. So they just like mixed in some Nahantu stuff. Didn't make sense.
And the expectations are different in a season. If you go into the next act of the main campaign, where you've had this, Lorath has been there the entire time, him just fucking off for an act doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. That makes this feel like an inconsequential digression, which is what it ultimately was. And they teased things, they kind of set expectations at the beginning in a way I did really like. The way they foregrounded the ramifications, the aftermath of the main campaign with Mother Prava and the burned knights and the guy with the freaky mask. I loved that. That was great. Cultists and religious fervor and mania. I love that shit.
Yeah,
and
they set us up really well.
But that does feel like peak Diablo.
Yes.
I'm so frustrated that those things didn't feel like they mattered until the post campaign. After you kill the final boss, and we'll get there, there are 2 or 3 quests that are labeled like they're still story campaign, but they're very much after.
It's like a little epilogue.
It's the falling
basically.
action, you know, after the boss fight, and you have to go do some dungeons. You have to do some activities.
Yeah, you have to clear out a stronghold. You know,
and it's all about the Burn Knights, and I liked that.
Yeah,
but the 6 hours before that,
I
just didn't understand.
Connect.
The balancing was so strange here, and the final boss I just referred to is Mephisto.
Yes.
And that should be catnip for me. You guys know how I feel about Mephistopheles and Mephisto and Faustus.
And just like Mephisto is very cool in this game.
The demon with the dog demon with the skull poking through.
Wolf thing. Yeah, he's awesome. Love him.
But the way they executed it, I found so deflated.
Yes.
Like it was the focus on him as the big villain here. Remember, he's the father of Lilith, who we killed at the end of the main campaign. So now he's rising to take her place as the big bad. He's the one who Neyrelle trapped in the Soul Stone and then absconded with. So as much as we're chasing Neyrelle through the main meat of the campaign here, we're in pursuit of Mephisto.
Right.
But they constantly undercut the drama and stakes of that conflict during the final boss fight.
Yeah, they kept being like, "Don't remember, I'm not the real Mephisto."
Yes.
It was so weird.
During the boss fight they built to for 6 hours, you're constantly being explicitly reminded that you're not really fighting him and he can't really die.
Yeah, so you're like, well, then what's the point?
Then what are we doing
So
here?
then it just feels like, come back next time where you'll actually get to kill Mephisto. It was so weird.
And I know on some level, in a series of games, you have to kind of put the toys back in the box at the end of the... You have to say Diablo can come back again in the next game because we want the big horned demon fight at the end of the story. Yeah. And if he's supposed to be this kind of eternal, ethereal thing, yes, you can't really kill Satan at the end of every game or you wouldn't have a sequel.
Yeah, so I understand, but there's a way to do it, and this was not it.
You don't do it in real time. You do it in a stinger at the end of the credits where, there's still like a little bit of him left and maybe he'll come back.
Yeah, like they could have done something, and this was just like...
As it's happening?
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
Don't worry, none of this matters.
Yeah, not good writing.
You're just clicking buttons right now. Nothing's at stake.
Yeah.
It felt like such a moment of self-sabotage. I didn't understand it.
And that's just how I felt for a lot of the season, was none of this matters.
Expansion.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This expansion is in none of this matters. So that was frustrating.
Yeah. So let's move to the other big addition in both Reaper of Souls and Vessel of Hatred. And that, of course, is a new class, an entirely new class. And I think it's more of an entirely new thing here because the Spiritborn has never appeared in a previous Diablo game.
Yes, it's brand new, right?
But the new class we got in Reaper of Souls, the Diablo III expansion, was the Necromancer. And I love the Necromancer. It has become maybe my favorite class in Diablo IV. I played it a couple seasons ago, and I took that character all the way to 100.
Yeah, it's become very good in Diablo IV. It didn't start out that way, but it's become very good.
It's the one you started with,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, because I loved it so much in Diablo III.
Exactly. It was so it's raising skeletons from the dead. It's blowing them up.
It feels so Diablo.
Corpse explosion is one of your skills. That alone is genuinely, that is the mountaintop for me. That is peak Diablo.
Awesome.
That is high gothic fantasy. That is hot topic perfection. That's all I want from this series.
Right.
As a way to transition into the Spiritborn here, tell me about your Spiritborn.
Sure.
How did you optimize it? What was it called? Because we did more of the role playing this time than we've done before.
We did. I did a Jaguar build because the Spiritborn, you can kind of choose between one or a combination of 4 animal spirits that you sort of embody.
Centipede, eagle, jaguar, and gorilla.
Yes. So I did the Jaguar because it seemed the most attacky and fast and cool and aggressive, and I was like, that sounds great. I love that. So I went for that. I did a girl. I'm always a girl. I don't like being a boy. It's weird. I always do a girl. And I named her Abatha after the main character of the book I just read called Slewfoot, which we talked about on the Patreon.
We will talk about
in the future about on the Patreon. She's like a witch and it's cool. So I was like, great. Sounds fun. And I, for the most part, enjoyed it. It was like, I was, especially as I leveled up, I got super, super fast and aggressive, and I was like jumping around and slashing at things. And, you know, your ultimate skill is where the Jaguar kind of comes out and circles around enemies and reels them in and kills them. And that was really, really fun. I think what I struggled with was one of the core like mechanics of this, I think this class, not just the Jaguar build, but this class is like your main attack, it automatically pulls you to enemies, which is really great and like means you're really effective. But I think it has two problems. One is that it means that I have to do less, which can get boring. I don't ever want to be bored. Two, when you're playing couch co-op, it sucked because there was neither of us could ever find ourselves on the screen. It was an absolute mess because all of a sudden I'd be like, wait, where am I? I thought I was over here, but I dashed over to this other enemy without realizing it. And then you're doing the same thing. And there's too much, there's a lot going on the screen. That's kind of Diablo style, which is fine. But it meant that half the time I wasn't totally sure where I was. And that was frustrating.
I want to linger on this point for a second because it really is important. The Spiritborn is another melee-focused class.
Oh, yeah, I should have said that.
I mean, I think that's the majority of the classes at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this visual lurch in the way the character moves and does its core attacks that I didn't find in the other classes here.
Mm-hmm.
There's this minor teleportation, almost like the dash or dodge that you have with the B or the circle button.
Right, but you're not deciding it's happening. It just
it's
happens.
sort of just when you do the attack,
Yeah.
it kind of zaps you a little closer, which means, because there was a reason we'll get to in a minute why I had to play some of this alone. And when you're playing it alone and the camera's only moving and tracking one character, it was okay.
I was going to say, how was it
enough.
alone?
It was fine.
Okay.
I think it was clearer because there's less of a hide and seek element to where your avatar is on screen,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not friendly for couch co-op.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself so often using my dash just so I could find my character.
Yeah.
Not because I was using it strategically, but I was like, I don't know where I am, so I gotta like find that out. And that was really frustrating. I also had one of my other attacks was, I don't know what it was called. They're all called like slash. Like they're all called something like that.
But you did all of the Jaguar skills.
I did
you
all
can mix
Jaguar.
and match them.
Yeah, I decided just to lean into Jaguar, and then maybe I'll play again. Maybe when we do the season, I'll do some combinations of stuff.
You're gonna do a new? Oh, you mean like respec?
Yeah, I think I'll
okay.
re-roll when we do it when we do the season. I think at least that's what I'd like to do. But whatever. So one of my attacks was basically it's like a big dash where you like slash through an enemy, and you can only do it if there's like a target, and that was really cool. But again, that didn't work for co-op because I would be excited to go get this other enemy that was kind of off screen or towards the edge. And so then I would dash away and then it would mess you up because all of a sudden things had moved. And it was just, there were too many things moving quickly and it was really hard to keep yourself centered. It was tough.
Yeah. So my Spiritborn, I think I had a similar but slightly different experience. So
Okay.
I went with the full Centipede build.
Yeah.
And Centipede is one of the first games. It's probably the first game I ever played.
Yeah.
We had a full arcade cabinet of this is some lore. We had a full arcade cabinet of Centipede, Millipede, Missile Command, and Let's Go Bowling.
Aww.
In my house when we were growing up, and it was just a big thing for my mom and my family. Centipede was just that game. It meant a lot. It had the big trackball, that you use on those arcades. So I'm very good with that. I'm very nimble on that big spinny ball thing. Every time I play,
I've seen you do it. It's amazing.
I mean, I've played Centipede on 100. I buy it for everything now. It's so nostalgic for me. And even having like the family high scores and competing, it was a big game for me. So I wanted to when I saw that Centipede was an option, I thought that would be a fun way to kind of pay tribute to that. So I made my character as green as possible. I made his hair green. I gave him some tattoos. I tried to make his eye color to match the titular Centipede. And I went with all of those skills.
Yeah, you looked really cool.
So I completely invested in this poison build. And I thought it was very middling until about level 35, and then it started to be very fun and rewarding.
Okay.
I wasn't like waiting on cooldowns like I've hated in the past. It just didn't feel very effective. I always felt like I was doing less damage and moving less efficiently and strongly than you were.
Yeah.
I noticed those I noticed those comparisons because we play couch co-op.
Yeah.
But by the time you hit level 35, you're getting much better items. Those items are synergizing more with your build. The perks that you're getting on legendary items, you get some uniques, and they really bring the build together. So once all of that was unlocked and I was kind of on the higher tier of build crafting, it really came alive for me. And I had a great time with the Spiritborn. I think it would be a good idea to respec into some other branches, but I enjoy a poison build. I think it's fun. In the same way I really enjoy a bleed build,
Yes.
when you're playing a rogue. I
that's
thought it was
always
pretty
the best.
similar.
Yeah, okay,
But that
interesting.
similarity, that was spotlighting something interesting for me, and I want to see what you make of this. One of the bugbears the community has had with Diablo IV since it launched was the kind of disposable nature of your characters.
Okay. What do you mean?
Because to make a comparison to most other live or ongoing games, especially something like Destiny, I remember when Destiny 2 launched in 2016, and there were 3 classes, so I made 3 characters, and I played through the campaign with those characters, and I really took to the Warlock. That was my favorite one. It was this big electric build, and it was awesome. Loved it. Every time there was a new season or new expansion, I would play with that character. And I would upgrade my gear, and until I dropped off, I probably spent 8 or 9 years with that character.
Oh, wow.
That meant a lot to me. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of investment in the look and feel of this character that is moving through a story and a world for a long time.
Can your character continue to level up indefinitely? Like, how does that work in that game?
Yes, you continue to invest and build out the character.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It's not, the leveling system is kind of different, but yes, you can use that character for all new content.
Wow, cool.
And
you can't do that here, can you?
No,
Yeah.
no. So you make a new character, you make a seasonal character for Diablo.
Yeah.
You can use them for that season, and then after that, they're shifted over to what they call the Eternal Realm, which means you can't play the next season's content.
But you could just like replay the campaign or just play
I don't even think
random
you can
end
do
game
that.
content. Oh, you can't even replay the campaign?
I don't think so.
Oh, actually, no, yeah, because when you
No.
build a new seasonal, you like choose to skip the campaign.
Right. Or you can play through it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you just do end game
You
stuff.
can do stuff like Helltides, you can do activities, you can do stuff on the overworld map, but you can't do the campaign and you can't do the new season.
Interesting.
Which basically puts that character out to pasture.
Yeah, I mean, I never go back to seasonal characters once the season has ended.
Which is sad, because I talked about that necromancer that I took to level 100.
Gurgle?
Yes, exactly. I'm invested in that character. I love the way that character looks, and I would love to jump into the new content with that. I do think you can play this new expansion with old characters.
Oh, okay.
So that's something.
That is something. Yeah, that makes sense because the expansion is forever. It's not seasonal, so it's not going to go away.
But the reason I brought up something like Destiny, when you have this huge investment in a class, most people just chose one and went with it for years.
Yeah.
So there was this constant, grass is greener thing of what would it be like if I opened up the other class? But do I want to make a new character? I've been rolling with this one for 5 or 6 years. Do I want to start over again and lose all my gear and it's not leveled properly? So there was this kind of frustration that you were only getting a third of the experience unless you were psychotic and playing everything 3 times.
Okay.
I feel like the Spiritborn, as this new class for the franchise, I feel like it's a way to move away from the pressure of that choice. Because it kind of feels like, I mean, the thing that we're both talking about with Spiritborn is the range of this class. But I think it's sort of a way to hedge between choosing any of the classes. It's a bunt in baseball terms, because you can kind of play all of the classes when you're playing Spiritborn.
Okay.
If you're doing the Centipede Spiritborn, which is a fast, slow, continuous damage that you're almost infecting enemies with, if you're playing a Centipede Poison Spiritborn, you're basically playing a Blood Build Rogue.
Or even, isn't there a poison build rogue?
I think there is.
Yeah.
Yes, there are. There's the caltrops and stuff.
Yeah, so you could do that. Yeah.
If you're doing the Eagle Lightning build Spiritborn, it's fairly close to the Nature Storm build of the Druid.
Or even maybe the lightning sorcerer build.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're doing the Jaguar build, you're getting more into barbarian territory.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a fiery barbarian. Yeah.
So you can kind of do
and the
any
gorilla
of these
could
things
be
at
also
once.
very barbarian as well. Neither of us really mess with the gorilla, but
And
that
you're
feels
gonna-
very barbarian.
Exactly. And you're going to have millions of gold by the time you're done with this campaign, with even the season. You're always in a good spot there.
Sure. So respecking wouldn't be a problem.
And they've minimized the cost of respecking.
Yeah. Which was a good move. Yeah. But oh, you're right.
Do you like this?
I know what
don't
you're
know.
saying. Yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about the multiple builds of each class to really be able to to say any of this really well, but I know what you're saying.
It's close enough. The build variety feels like a way to mitigate that decision paralysis.
Yeah, there is quite a lot of variety, which you're right. It's on its face, it is very exciting. You're like, wow, I can make this class however I want. I can customize it. But at the same time, you kind of want it means the class doesn't have a very strong identity. And that's kind of frustrating. I mean, It was good for us because when we were playing together, it meant we could both play the same class and not get bored. Because other times where we've played the same class, it's been terribly boring. So because there was so much variety and diversity within the class, it felt like we were playing two different classes. But that's not very good for the class itself because, again, it doesn't have a strong sense of identity and what it is.
So here's the follow-up question. If we're kind of saying that a lot of these Spiritborn builds are fairly similar to the experiences you get playing the other classes, do you think, because I think you've played them all at this point.
All the classes, yeah. Except, no, I played Druid for maybe 10 levels and I got bored.
Druid's tough. Do you think that Spiritborn added a new play experience to this game?
I mean, kind of, because it was... yes, it did, but I don't think it was any better than anything else.
Okay,
because
a lateral move.
Here's what I'll say, because the Jaguar was fun, but honestly, I feel like the game really wants you to mix and match the different spirit elements, because I said this to you, I think, while we were playing, all of my skills kind of look and feel the same as a Jaguar. Like your main attack versus your secondary attack, kind of the same. My X and Y, my those buffing skills that you don't really think about but you kind of just do automatically, truly I couldn't tell you what they're called or what they do because they're just background and they didn't feel really like an integral part of what I was doing. I just, every time the cooldown ended, I would activate them. I don't remember what they even do. And then the ultimate is different, but otherwise it was like, I wasn't bored, but I was almost bored. Versus I'm thinking about my Barbarian that I had last season. I was locked in. There was a full system to the different skills I was applying and how they all coexist together. Same with my Necromancer. It's a song and it's a dance where you have to activate things at the right time, and each skill does its own thing and is contributing pretty significantly. So I feel like this did add something a little new, just in its in the speed, in the fieriness, in the slashiness of it all, and the ultimate skill with the Jaguar is cool, but it didn't add anything that was better than what it already has.
Yeah, like I said, we tried to take the role-playing element of this role-playing game more seriously. So when I committed to this full Centipede homage, even in the look of my character, I named him Atari, just as another element of that game. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to experiment with combining all of these spirits, so maybe my perspective is a little limited.
Sure.
But I think there's another side to that coin, because if all of these different builds echo other available classes in the game, then mixing and matching elements of those would feel like I'm kind of playing all the characters at once and maybe stir them into this big soup. And the thing I love about classes in RPGs is that there is a price of making a choice. And playing through the game as a Necromancer is a very different experience than playing through it as a rogue or a sorcerer.
Yes.
I like the difference in experience. That's why these games are so replayable and intriguing for me. So I don't love blurring that identity. And if we pull this back to Reaper of Souls, I don't think Spiritborn added a new experience and a new way to experience the game in the same way the Necromancer did
Certainly
at that time.
Not. Yeah, exactly. That Necromancer felt like it like on the one hand, for me, because I never played another Diablo game, it was a brand new thing. It was a brand new way to experience the game. And yet also it felt like it perfectly fell in line with the world and the story and the gothic fantasy of it all. And now it feels like I can't imagine Diablo 3 without the Necromancer, without that expansion, without Act 5. For Diablo 4, I can certainly imagine it without this expansion, without Nahantu, without the Spiritborn class, and it's still the same game. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not accomplishing the same thing.
And because we've talked about this in real time, our experience with Diablo 4 since launch, those memories kind of fade together. They start to blur. So yes, I've played, I think, 7 or 8 different characters since this game launched, and all of those experiences across every class, they kind of start to blur together in your memory.
Yeah, they do.
So playing the Spiritborn was just kind of like replaying my memories, but shuffled.
Yeah,
you know,
and maybe not as good.
It didn't.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable to play, but I would not call it a new experience or a new angle on this world.
I didn't dislike the class the way I've disliked, the druid, or the way I initially disliked the necromancer at the very beginning of the game. But I don't feel very attached to it, and I wasn't particularly excited by it.
I did like that I was never frustrated with it. It didn't feel great until level 35, but the fact that, and Rod Ferguson, the head of the studio, has talked about this a lot, the fact that they balanced this class for fun, which means not balancing it at all and letting it kind of run away and be fun and doing a ton of damage, I love that. And that is absolutely the philosophy the game needs and has moved towards with every new content update, season, or expansion.
Yeah.
That philosophy is great. Remember us grinding through with the barbarian and the necromancer through the main campaign.
Ugh, painful.
There was none of that frustration here. So it was a great experience. I just don't think it was a new marvelous introduction in the same way the Necro felt in D3.
You're very right, yeah.
To wrap up this section, I have kind of a question here. Let's do a quick power ranking of the classes. Now that we have a new one.
Now that we've got this one. Okay.
We have Spiritborn, Rogue, Necro, Barb, Sorcerer, and Druid.
Well, Druid's the last on that list, I've got to say.
I think I agree. I agree.
Didn't you just play a Druid though, like in the lead up to the expansion?
I've got a little side project going with a Druid that you might hear about more later.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I'm trying to get better with that class and get more of a handle on it. I would still put Barbarian dead last because I've just hated the experience I've had with that.
You've got to try it again though, Cam, because I just played it last season and it was awesome.
Okay.
It was really, really good.
All right.
I think you got to try it again.
Right,
maybe our next season you'll play Barbarian.
It's hard to keep 6 things in your head at one time.
It sure is.
Let's do like a tier list. Okay, let's Spiritborn from S to D or F. Where would you put Spiritborn?
I don't know, like B tier.
B
is fine.
B seems fair.
It's not great, but it's fine.
How about Rogue?
Rogue is A or S.
A, I think.
Yeah.
Necro?
Necro has become S.
S, totally.
Like Rogue has been solidly A. Necro started in F and has risen to S. It's gone on a long journey.
It's an amazing trajectory, though.
It sure is.
Barbarian, I'm still going to put an F until I'm proven
I'm
otherwise.
going to put an A. It's very good now. I'm putting an A. Sorcerer, C.
Yeah,
I don't like Sorcerer.
And Druid?
Druid is F tier.
Druid, I'm going to call the bottom of C tier.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm excited to hear why later. Okay.
The next thing I want to talk about here, and this is an unfortunate section I have to include, is technical bugs. So we started playing this a couple days after launch.
Yeah, not even day one.
Anytime there's an expansion for a live game, I mean, I've never played a Destiny expansion the day it goes up, and I just kind of carried that wisdom into Diablo here.
Right. I mean, even the day it launched, there was like
it was a mess.
12-hour delay or something,
So yeah, there were some launch troubles here, which again is part and parcel with launching a live game and maintaining it. It's just
you just
how
know
it goes.
It's how it goes.
It's just how it goes. It's unfortunate, but it's baked in at this point. But we didn't really start playing this until, I don't know, the next weekend.
Yeah, because like we couldn't play it on launch day, and then we
had a lot of stuff.
Then we had other stuff going on. We're like, we'll just wait until we can like actually play when they've sorted out some bugs. So it wasn't until like probably 5 days later.
One of the first cutscenes, big produced, beautiful production value cutscenes.
Beautiful cinematic.
Which introduces that masked burned knight villain.
Yeah.
Not only was the dialogue completely clipped out.
Just muted. There was no dialogue.
The subtitles were gone too.
Yeah, so like we heard the music, we heard the sound effects.
Yeah, the little like as he made little noises.
But there was no dialogue and there were no subtitles.
So we were just like,
a little. I wonder what's going on. Oh, it was so sad.
And then much, much later in the campaign, when you start being pushed into the new activity, the I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, the Curast Undercity. Maybe it's Curast Undercity.
I don't know.
Which is the one with the slight timer.
Yeah, that thing is cool, by the way.
The braziers.
I really like that thing.
You kill enemies to get more time. Yeah. There's a great map. You move through these 3 floors quickly, and then you have a boss fight. That was a fantastic activity.
Really enjoyed that.
And never stressful. I hate timers in games, but it wasn't. We didn't fail, and we weren't close to failing on any difficulty.
Right, and what was great is like even if you don't get like you can just zoom through. You may not get the full level of like level 4 of all the rewards and stuff, but you can still like get through it. So it was really nicely balanced. Loved that thing.
But it wouldn't count progress for both of us. It would only
Yes.
count progress for Maggie. So then,
Which is weird because Cam is like the main player. I'm always like the player 2 that joins. So most of the time we're just like Cam is the one tracking quests and I'm just going along, and it naturally just, brings me along and I complete the quest too. For some reason, only I was making progress, and it was so weird.
So then I just had to replay those quests alone. And you just
Yeah.
had to sit there twiddling your thumbs so we could stay on the same page and match progress.
It was so dumb.
There is and I know that's a bug, and I know they'll fix it. In the same way I was experiencing, I don't know why I said it like that. I was experiencing constant hard crashing and system resets when I was playing the game on Steam Deck. Just
Yes.
another thing to flag there.
Yes.
Also, it's bullshit that the expansion doesn't cross over when I buy it once, but I think there's a bit of a worrying trend here. We talked about the visual kind of lurch in the minor teleportation the Spiritborn does, which makes the game much less friendly for couch co-op.
And it's just jerky and unpleasant.
But it's fine when you're playing alone. It really is.
Okay.
But it's not friendly to couch co-op, which is how I love this series.
Yeah.
For more than a decade.
That's how I prefer to play. I like playing alone, but I much prefer to play with you.
But there's even more kind of hostility to couch co-op in this expansion because there's this new mechanic called mercenaries. You remember in D3 you had companions, people who would come with you and you could give them some gear and they'd be helpful enough in a combat scenario.
Yeah, and there's like a whole thing in this campaign where you have to like go unlock all of the mercenaries. It's like a whole important part of the campaign.
It's 4 side quests to go get them.
And they're not even side quests. They're kind of like they're not the same as side quests, but you can skip them, but the game doesn't want you to skip them.
They are core to the central experience and story.
Yeah, right.
You cannot use those mercenaries in local co-op.
No.
And one of the other big expansions, which I wanted to be able to talk about on this episode, is a raid, which is a larger, more complicated dungeon with some puzzle mechanics. Raids have always existed in this type of game. You can't do that in local co-op either. This is a bad sign. This is a worrying trend to have 2 or 3 couch co-op hostile additions to the game in one expansion. And I hate that.
Me too. The raid makes a little more sense to me because because you can just go off and do whatever you want, and obviously it's not going to do split screen, but we could just stick together or just do split screen. So, but I still kind of get that, but the mercenary makes no sense. Why can't the both of us bring a mercenary?
Just make them weaker.
Yeah.
There's a way to balance
too many
for it.
people. What are you doing?
There's a way to balance for it.
That was really annoying. I was like, why did I spend all this time unlocking all these people? And I want to engage with this new mechanic that you've provided me in this expansion that I paid for, and I can't do it.
And if I have to take some sort of compromise, say they do add in split screen for the raid in the moments where you need to operate puzzle mechanics on opposite sides of a map, fine. Then split it up and make the resolution worse. But don't gate me off from doing the content.
Yeah, right.
When I've been able to do the rest of this 1.5 year long experience in couch co-op.
Yeah.
I hate siloing content.
We've never not been able to do something in couch co-op. That's really bad.
Dislike that.
Yeah.
Let's zoom out to something happier. So we do this segment in all of our season episodes, but I think it applies here as well because it really shapes this experience. We usually open with a little state of the game section. And there's some of that here. There are a lot of major updates and system overhauls that accompanied this new expansion. And of course, the new season, which launched on the same day, which we're going to cover in a future episode. They overhauled this time the leveling system. So I said previously I took that Necromancer Gurgle to level 100. That is not possible anymore.
Oh, that's right, because now maximum is 60. That's right.
Yes, so we lowered it from 100 to 60 and retroactively kneecapped those old characters.
Yes.
So they're still maxed out, but it's at the lower max, which is fine because honestly, it was a drag.
Yeah, 100 is a lot. I've never gotten a character in Diablo IV to level 100 because I don't have that kind of investment. I'm never going to do that.
The XP requirements get higher and higher for each level.
Okay.
So by the time you're at
it gets harder and harder.
It just takes longer.
That's what I mean.
It takes longer. So by the time you're at level 92, it's like you see it on the horizon, but it's like nose to the grindstone.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, okay.
It's not something I would do again. Last season, I don't remember what class I played at this point. I think it was a sorcerer.
You played a sorcerer, yeah.
I took that character to level 86 and then just kind of lost the zest for it. I meant to do 100, but I just couldn't be bothered to do those last 14.
My barbarian, who I loved and played a lot solo, I think I only maybe got to 75.
So this is a good thing, I think, overall.
Yes.
I don't love love that my level 100, it looked cool on the character select screen to have that journey
Sure.
right there with an extra.
Yeah.
It's stupid, but it looked cool.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was, proud of it, I guess, if you can be proud of such menial things.
I'm proud of you.
Taking it down to 60 is smarter, though, because
Yes.
they've also added new skills
was
to
gonna
every
say,
class,
yes.
including the older classes.
Yeah, so you get more skill points. You get like 10 more skill points. Like, because I was always so frustrated by in like before, when you like after you reach level 50 or 60, you no longer get skill points. You just move to Paragon, which is fine. The Paragon system is cool. I still don't understand it at all, but
Yes,
it's
you
cool.
do. I've explained it to you 100 times.
And yet nothing is sticking in there. It's just going right through. But anyway, so like, but I was like, but I want to use more of this skill tree that I have, this amazing skill tree that's specific to my class and unlocks new things for me to do. Even though I'm level 75, I can't do these things. Can't I not like transport my Paragon points to this? I don't understand. So I like that you get more skill points as you level up, even though the leveling is kind of squished. I like that.
Yeah, and it feels like you do complete your arc of the character. Once you've done all the skill points, that should be the end of the character.
Yes,
because
I agree.
When you're doing endgame, when you're doing Paragon boards, that is bonus time. That is you just riffing and having fun in the game. But the character, I mean, yes, you get more powerful as you go through Paragon boards. I've done that whole journey. Yes, you do get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not fundamentally changing the way the character plays anymore.
You're not adding new things. You're just buffing what you already have.
So I like this reframing of that experience. And as another kind of tip of the hat to the way Vessel of Hatred played out, just working through this campaign pretty thoroughly in the way we did, it took us almost all the way to level 60.
Yeah. Yeah,
And obviously,
which makes more sense to me. That feels more complete.
Yes.
I've always thought it feels weird to end a campaign at level like 40.
Right.
You're like, what?
Especially
but
when
I'm
you
not
do
done.
have to roll a new character for each new season.
Yes, yeah.
Totally.
And again, those seasonal campaigns are shorter and it makes sense, but I'm always like left feeling like, but my character's not done, so now I feel like I have to keep playing. It just doesn't make sense to me. It feels manipulative and I don't like it.
So our last segment here to kind of make sense of Vessel of Hatred, and I think this is the most important one. There's a reason we've started labeling these, if you're watching on YouTube instead of listening to the podcast, we've started calling this fun factor. We're labeling it the casual experience on the thumbnail, because I would call us committed casual players.
Yes, that's perfect. Committed casual. That's great.
We jump into every
Is that a dress code? Like for a wedding? Committed casual?
we jump into every new piece of content.
Everybody's wearing cargo pants. Sorry.
Like right when it comes out.
Yeah.
And we finish everything, but we are not doing that like sweaty build crafting and just gamifying everything.
Because I just like don't care to try to understand that. I'm just here to have a good time. Yeah.
Right.
I respect people who really dive into that stuff. That's very cool. I'm glad that this game caters to that kind of player, but I'm just not that kind of player.
So we talked about the aesthetic and the plot. We talked about the new class, some technical bugs, state of the game. But if someone were to just go up to you on the street or maybe ask in a YouTube comment and say, is Vessel of Hatred fun? Is it good? Am I going to have a good time? I like this game. Is this worth it? And that's not the point of these discussions, but it is a factor that people are curious about.
Yeah.
So if I'll give you a minute to formulate your thoughts on
I don't
this.
know. I haven't actually thought about this question.
If someone were to ask me just, is Vessel of Hatred fun? I would say the expansion is bad from a story perspective. I think it's tonally discordant and completely unsatisfying. But the gameplay experience was definitely fun.
Well,
and
yes, that's the thing. It was a fun, different game. That's what it was. It didn't feel like Diablo.
I think a lot of the reason I had fun with it is because of couch co-op. It's because of all of the regular system updates and overhauls that they've done since launch. The game is in a very healthy... It's at a very healthy spot right now. I mean, look at our response to seasons 4 and 5. Gleeful. Fantastic seasons. And it just feels great to play. It's rewarding. The way they have beefed up Endgame. I mean, the things like just running Helltides or doing Nightmare Dungeons, I love that shit.
That is very fun. And it continues to be fun. It doesn't
feels
get
like a
very old.
pastime.
Yeah.
No, it's just fun to jump into. So I'm left with this impression that Vessel of Hatred wasn't good, but I really liked playing through it. And I think part of that is just I'm invested in it and it's fun to do with you and kind of bullshit about while it's going.
Yeah.
But it's also that, I don't know, it was fun, but when I compare it to the season, And we haven't started season 6 yet, but I think this season's going to be fun.
Yeah, I wonder if the season will be like better than the expansion.
That's my sneaking suspicion. I think the season is going to be better because the theme and aesthetic, I mean, it's called Season of Hatred Rising. That sounds great already. But it's also building on these reliable systems. They've stumbled and excelled through this seasonal model 6 times now. There's more of a proven structure there. I'm expecting that to be more consistent than Vessel of Hatred was.
Which is weird because you don't pay for the seasons.
Right.
You pay for the expansion.
And that's tricky. Do you have an answer, Maura?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I do. It was a fun Diablo-style game that I enjoyed. The story wasn't very good, but I enjoyed playing it, but I didn't feel like it was part of Diablo. Is it worth it? If you really like playing Diablo, like if you like the style of game in terms of like play, like gameplay, yeah, it was worth it. If you're really invested in the like aesthetic and, you know, that kind of style of Diablo, maybe not. And the new class is fine. It's just fine.
It's very fun to play. But when you zoom out...
I didn't find it very fun. I just found it fun.
I mean, compared to some of the experiences we've had in the past, I think it is quite fun and never frustrating.
I mean, yeah, I don't want my money back. Like, I'm not like...
No.
I don't want a refund. But it wasn't what I wanted. But I would still be like, yeah, it was a good time.
So our meatball final question here to kind of round this discussion out. After your experience and your time with Vessel of Hatred, are you more or less excited for the next expansion?
I'm a little less excited than I was because I'm nervous that we're going to have some of the same issues. But I'm also optimistic because the last couple seasons have been so good. Do you know what this new season promises that's like not already part of the expansion? Do you know what I mean? Like, what else is there going to be?
I've avoided the seasonal stuff just to kind of focus on Vessel of Hatred.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious. Okay, yeah, well, that'll be interesting. So, yeah, I'm excited. What about you? Are you excited?
I'm still bought in. I'm on the train.
I mean,
yeah. I really like Diablo 4. I've had a great time with it.
I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to, like, not play new stuff that they have.
I love playing it with you, and then I love grinding through endgame alone after you give up and move on and go back to other things. That's fine.
Sure.
I enjoy the rhythms of this game. So, yes, for me, it was absolutely worth it.
Sure.
But I'm more and more frustrated and disappointed about the story and aesthetics as I think about this and the days kind of pass.
What class do you think you're going to play in the new season? Are you going to play Spiritborn again, but do it differently? Are you going to just play a barbarian or something? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, I imagine, I guess this was just an assumption I was making, but I figured we would just use these characters for the season.
Oh.
Because they're already seasonal characters for this.
Oh, are they? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, because the season started on the day the expansion came out.
But did we make them seasonal characters?
Yes.
Oh, I just don't remember that.
So if you want to respec and jump into some other spirits.
I think I might. I think the game wants you to combine. I think it really does. So maybe I'll add in some elements of the eagle or something.
And I don't know if I want to start over right now with someone else.
Yeah, okay. All right, fine. Well, then we'll stick with our Spiritborns and maybe just respec them a bit and change them up. I mean, maybe I'll completely respec and I'll just go for, gorilla or something. I don't know. I
want some more classic Diablo in the next expansion.
Me too.
This wasn't what I was expecting. I had a fun time with it, but I also was very let down.
Yeah, there were some challenges.
I mean, that's why we're titling this episode, if you're watching it again on YouTube, where our titling conventions are a little different. I'm calling this an identity crisis for Diablo 4.
That's great. That's perfect.
Because every time the seasons have let us down, it has been because there's one really dumb mechanic, like the traps, remember in Season 3?
Oh, I try to forget those.
The weird robot spider, the Seneschal in Season of the Construct.
That was also Season 3. Season 3 was tough.
Not good. And even though the systems underneath were still very good, we are somehow at the whim and mercy of those more coat of paint level decisions. So it can excel or fall on its face based on those aesthetics. They're not, they are important. They really do matter here for a visual experience. So I don't know. I think it is an identity crisis, but I have full faith that in the next season and eventually in a year or whatever, the next expansion, we're going to roll the dice again. And there might be a new aesthetic, and maybe this one will appeal to me more. But the thing that keeps me confident in the game is the strength of those underlying systems.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I wonder, do you know what the other, the general online response has been to this expansion? I have no idea.
It has been polarized. I think people who are committed, and maybe committed hardcore more than committed casual, those people I've seen caring less about the story and more about the gameplay. So the fact that the systems are in a good place has left those people satisfied.
Okay, yeah.
I've also seen people incredibly let down by the story. For people who are more traditional, we're here for, to be spun a yarn. I've seen it be quite divisive, but I believe it has sold well.
Okay. Yeah, I believe that for sure. Okay.
It's not a Lightfall situation, despite the green comparison.
I also wonder how much like response has sort of meshed between like the expansion and the new season, because they came out at the same time. So I wonder how much people are truly able to separate their feelings about either one, when responding to it. So
sure.
It's interesting. But I would love to hear what our listeners think about this season, about anything we've said, about, any of their experiences. Have you done the new class? Have you added, did you do like a gorilla build? Did you do an eagle? Like, what did you do? I would love to hear about people's experience.
Yes,
for
please,
sure.
Down in the comments. We're going to continue talking about this game as long as it's going.
Also, what do you think about our phrase committed casual? Yeah. I like it a lot, actually. I think it's perfect, because I feel like if you say I'm a casual gamer for Diablo, I go, no, I'm not. I play every season. What are you talking about? But like in the grand scheme of things, like relatively, I guess I am casual. So committed casual is perfect.
So we've got that whole Diablo playlist for the rest of our coverage, going back to even before the launch of Diablo IV. We did a big, long retrospective on Diablo III. Yeah. One of my favorite episodes we've ever done. We've been covering more games lately on the channel. Recently, just off the dome here, we've done Halo 1. I went back to Combat Evolved 20 years later to talk about that. We talked about Final Fantasy 16 in terms of heroic scale. We talked about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And even going back further, we've done Path of Exile. We've done Fallout 3 and Starfield. We've got a lot of game episodes going.
Hogwarts Legacy. We did all kinds of stuff.
And if you want even more episodes from us over on Patreon, we have a whole mountain of bonus episodes piling up. We have, if you're into Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, we did a whole series going through Fire and Blood, which is the source material for that show. And we also have this ongoing roundup series called The Breakfast Buffet. Lately, it's 3 works of art in every episode that we compare, contrast, and reflect on. Those are the more difficult conversations, where it's not just, we do a 20-minute thing on a horror movie we love to get all excited about it. These are more grappling, long-form type discussions that I think are incredibly fruitful. So go check out the Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back here on Tuesday with another brand new episode.